Now, don't let the game fool you by telling you that this is the second stage, because this is actually the first stage with real level design. Now, the gimmick for this stage and every other stage afterwards is barriers are going to pop up throughout, and you got to kill every single enemy in that specific area in order to take the barrier out. But you can move around and under the barriers and force the enemies not to spawn, which is a strategy I'm going to take advantage of later. But for this specific stage, I'm not going to take advantage of that because I'm going to need to kill as many enemies as I possibly can to get a high amount of points for my S rank. Now, it may not look like it, but I am going to kill the enemies in a very specific order whenever I can, mainly to prevent as much backtracking as I possibly can. I just want to kill the enemies in one single straight line if possible to make the stage go much smoother. Now, for the next set of enemies, I am actually going to move past these first two mobs and go straight for the third set and kill them in reverse order. The main reason why I'm doing this is because I want the game to force spawn all these enemies at once as opposed to a staggered state. Because the more enemies you kill in a Tate chain, the more points you get, and for getting the S ranks, you really want your Tate chains to last as long as possible. You don't really want to drop them, because dropping Tate chains and combos means less points. Now, the big reason why I'm trying to stay in the air as much as I can with Hotsuma is because you move much faster in the air with your air dashing as opposed to ground dashing. But that also leads into the fact that every time you hit an enemy with an air attack, you regain both your double jump and your double dash. And if you're playing as Hisui or Nirvana, that also makes your double kick. Now, that's really, really useful because it allows you to cover really long distances in a short amount of time. Now, for this stage, it's not really that big of a deal because most of the enemy mobs are grouped up together, close enough to where you really need your double kick. But if you're playing Hisui or Nirvana, that's really, really useful. Now, for this set of enemies, I want to stay as far away as the shooting bugs as much as possible, because unlike games like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, more so Devil May Cry, this game doesn't really have off-screen chivalry, if you want to call it that. These enemies are very aggressive on-screen or off-screen, regardless of where you're at. And specifically shooting enemies in this game, they are just ruthless sometimes, as opposed to enemies with actual melee attacks, which I find that to be very, very frustrating. Not so much in this stage, but more so later on, most notably stages 11 and 12. It just gets sort of insane. Now, for this next section, I am actually going to go to the right first in order to farm a little bit more points for our S rank. This stage, not so much with other stages, but with this stage in particular, it is pretty strict with how many points it gives us. I'm sure I could have made this a lot easier by going for 100% destruction or more destruction points, but just killing the enemies 100% and killing the boss in one hit with the Tate and not using any scrolls, it barely gives us enough points for the S rank. I believe you need 135,000 points for the S rank, and I barely get that with this stage. And as you can see, going from enemy to enemy in the air with your stealth dash and double jump like that, it is much faster, and I think it's much cleaner than plotting on the ground, attacking enemies with high recovery frames, because that, of course, leaves you open to getting hit. And now we're introduced to the big boys. Big boy enemies like those, they're known for blocking attacks, normal attacks, but with Hotsuma, he can just do the charge attack and make it a non-issue. Their big issue instead is their limited hitbox when they die. Now see, as Shinobi, when you killed a bigger enemy, their hitbox would disappear. Their physical hitbox would disappear and you can phase through them. That's how you can tell that you killed them. But in this game, that doesn't happen. Their hitbox still lingers on, and that actually messes up positioning for enemy mobs. Now, thankfully, it doesn't really become a big issue in this segment, but it is a bit annoying that I have to go out of my way to physically jump past the bigger enemies as opposed to just phasing through them like I can the smaller enemies, because it really comes to a head at the later stages, specifically stages 10, 11, and 12, where you're constantly having bigger enemies spawn in and out of the stage, and they're physically pushing you away past the next enemy that spawns in. So while it is one of the more obnoxious things, it is something you can play around with experience and just grinding the game out. And the most obnoxious thing in this game isn't even that. It's actually the camera, but I'll get to that when the time is right. Now, as we're making our way up this climb towards the final section of the stage, as you can see, the bug enemies, as soon as they spawn in, they're ready to go. And more often than not, as soon as they spawn in, they can and will shoot you, ruining a no damage run attempt. I mean, I've had a few of my runs die to these bugs at this particular section right here. Now, the plan is to use the kunai for the bigger enemies, which freezes them, making it so that you can't block and just get your free hits in. That was the plan here, but for some reason I abandoned it. I abandoned that plan, dropped the tate on this bigger enemy, almost get hit by this bug, but I was able to salvage it, kill the three bugs before killing the final two big boy enemies and making our way up to the boss of the stage. How I was able to salvage that, I have no idea. You could call it situational awareness. I just call it being really lucky. Now, I do have an interesting strategy that allows me to manipulate the boss's AI, if only for a bit. It all depends on how close or far away we get to it when it decides to attack. The first thing we're going to do is destroy the tentacle so we don't have to worry about it attacking us, and it's going to reveal its weak spot to us. The weak spot is completely irrelevant to Hotsuma, because we're not going to hit that specific point. Instead, what I wanted to do was force it to spawn the enemies after the third time, but I was a little bit too close, so I decided to do the ground pound again. But that's alright, we are going to destroy the tentacles. This time I do get far enough away so that he will spawn the enemies. Instead, we're going to get closer for a fourth time, do a shuriken burst to pacify all the enemies, kill them with just enough time for a sword charge, and get the Yoko. And that is stage 2 where I barely get the S plus rank. I hope you enjoy watching this as much as I enjoy running it, and see you next time.